Welcome everyone to the Wasaga Beach Chamber of Commerce All Candidates meeting for the federal riding of Simcoe-Grey. Welcome to the Wasaga Beach Recplex. I'm John Eaton from 95.1 The Peak FM, and I'm very pleased to be your moderator for tonight's event. Tonight we have the candidates here to discuss the issues that matter to us all in Simcoe-Grey. On October 19th, you will have the opportunity to vote for one of these honorable citizens. To help you make the important decision, the Wasaga Beach Chamber of Commerce and the local media partners have cooperated to bring you this event. We will hear from members of the media in a little while. But now we're going to ask our candidates to deliver opening comments. Candidates will be given 3 minutes for their opening address, and at the end of the evening, we'll offer them another 2 minutes to conclude the evening. We have a timekeeper seated right off stage, so the candidates will be aware when they're running short on time. The order of speaking was chosen by draw just prior to the program. As luck would have it, our first candidate to speak is JoAnne Fleming from the Green Party. JoAnne?
Thank you very much. I'm JoAnne Fleming, candidate for Green Party Simcoe-Grey, and I have decided to run as a candidate because I care deeply about the future that our children, my children, all of our children will have beyond our lives. I've been a resident of Collingwood since 1998. I grew up on a farm south of London, and the values that my father transferred to me and my awareness of how interconnected all of our environmental communities are and us to them was critical to my foundation. I have been an educator. I have taught at the college level environmental concerns, pollution economics, energy regulation, and other courses. I have been a small business owner as a landscape architect and as an environmental speaker. I've been deeply involved in my communities wherever I have lived. I have founded the Sewage Use City Beautification Program way back in 1980, long before city beautification programs were common. I've been chairing tourism committees, quality of life committee, economic development committee. I was part of the group that created the Cedar Grove Labyrinth of Thornbury. I have been very active in my communities as I have tried to influence public policy relating to environment and health and green economics. I am a speaker and an author, and I have spent decades researching these issues that are part of the platform of the Green Party. I've spent decades researching issues about food quality, food safety, food security, water issues, ocean issues, fisheries issues, energy issues, all of the issues that are so interconnected. I've looked closely at an alternative to our current economic model. The economic model that is all about profit and there is no other measure. I believe that all decisions must be made based on a triple economic model in which we are looking closely at the environmental impacts of our decisions, the social impacts of our decisions, and the economic impacts of our decisions. All of these must be considered. The model must change so that we are truly looking at the future that our children will inherit from us. As a citizen of this community, I believe that I have a great deal to offer. I've lived in a number of different places, and I bring what I've seen and learned in those communities, and I believe that I have a great deal to offer. Once again, to summarize, change is inevitable, positive change is chosen, and I urge you to take a look seriously at the Green Party policies for Simcoe-Grey and for Canada. Thank you.
JoAnne Fleming, Green Party of Canada. Thank you. Our next speaker is from the New Democratic Party, David Matthews.
Good evening. I feel quite honored to be here. I represent a party that basically is a grassroots party. It was started in the 30s because of, let's say, social unjust. I myself, I have been 10 years in Toronto in the affordable housing area. I was a president of a co-op for 3 years, on board of directors for 5, and I fought for affordable housing in Toronto. I was also a director to help get poor kids into sports by raising money so that they could be in athletics. I was also one of the founding members of the Quality for Education group. It was a grassroots group whose purpose was to improve the quality of education in Ontario. One of the reasons I am running, and I decided to run, I've run twice provincially, and I decided I wasn't going to run again, but I was asked to run, and I thought about it, and I decided I would because I want our Canada back. Canada, most people in Canada right now are saying we need change. For 150 years, we have been electing either conservative or liberal governments who do the same thing continually. And what is the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing continually and expecting different results. That is what the liberals and conservatives have done. I've talked to senior citizens and I reminded them in the 30s, during the Depression, both conservative and liberal leaders, Bennett and King, said the same statements. We are in a depression, but our economy is strong. Mr. Harper, not too long ago, said, and I quote, "We are in a recession, but our economy is very strong." What does that tell people? 150 years is the same thing. I'm tired of seeing a government giving corporations who make billions of dollars profit our hard-earned tax money while we have poverty at record levels in this country. We need to have a change. Why are seniors struggling to keep their homes? Why are our veterans being treated like garbage when they have their benefits cut and they're in poverty? They can't get medical assistance. There was more veterans committed suicide last year than were killed in the war in Iraq. I think that's disgraceful for our country. Why are all the other nations in this world laughing at Canada for our environmental policies? Harper has scrapped them all. Right now, he is going to scrap our health care system. They cut $36 billion in transfers. The provinces need that money to maintain our health care system. Harper does not care. Today or yesterday, he announced he was going to cut the health research fund by 50%. That means all these people that do research into health will have to go to the private corporations to get funding.
And that's your time, David Matthews. David Matthews from the New Democratic Party. Next to speak to you, Dr. Kellie Leitch from the Progressive Conservatives of Canada.
Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and good evening. I'd like to thank the Wasaga Beach Chamber of Commerce for hosting us this evening for this very important event. It's an honor and a privilege to serve as your Member of Parliament, and it has been over the last 4 years. As your voice in Ottawa, I'm proud to represent the values of this riding, both in the House of Commons and at the Cabinet table as Canada's Minister of Status of Women and Minister of Labour. This is a privilege that I hope to once again be entrusted with as I seek another term as your Member of Parliament. In this election, you will be choosing who has the experience today to manage our economy and to keep our country safe. As a Conservative representative, I'll work to ensure that all of you have more of your hard-earned money back in your pockets. By way of example, whether it be seniors' income splitting or our new seniors tax credit, that money is yours. It should not be in the hands of bureaucrats in Ottawa. In fact, today, Canadians enjoy the lowest federal tax burden in 50 years in Canada. Now, our government also knows that national security isn't something that should be taken lightly. Let me be clear. The Conservative Party is the only party that thinks ISIS is worth fighting. Our Conservative government has taken action in the fight against those who pose a threat and those who seek to destroy everything that we hold dear. Make no mistake, we will work to ensure that all Canadians are safe both here at home and abroad. This election is about the economy. These are turbulent times in the global market, and Canada is not immune to the impacts of downturns in China or troubles in Europe. That being said, we've emerged with a budgetary surplus and one of the best job creation records in the G7. A Conservative government will continue to keep our economy strong and country safe. There is a clear choice. The Conservative government that has lowered your taxes and created jobs versus Justin's plan that will run deficits and raise taxes, and the NDP who will raise your taxes but kill jobs. A Conservative government is very focused on making sure we have a strong economy, as well as making sure our country is safe. I look forward to answering your questions this evening. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. Have a good evening.
Dr. Kellie Leitch, Progressive Conservative Party. I would like to remind the rest of us here at the Wasaga Beach Recplex that we are going to hear our candidates out. They're taking the time for us. We appreciate them being here. Next up, Mike MacEachern from the Liberal Party of Canada.
Thanks very much. It is a pleasure to be here and welcome everyone. I was drawn to participate in this election because I believe in hope and hard work, and I believe that better is possible. I believe that every citizen should have the opportunity to succeed and that no citizen should be left behind. We need to raise the level of respect between parliamentarians and between a member of parliament and the people they represent. People aren't scary. They have ideas, sometimes different ideas than the ones you as a representative of the people may have, but it is absolutely your responsibility to represent the wishes and dreams of your community. Governance is all about putting citizens' hard-earned tax dollars to work for them. An MP's role is to see that the riding you represent gets its fair share. The riding desperately needs money to overhaul an aging infrastructure with special attention to roads, bridges, recreation, schools, and hospitals. My experience has taught me the importance of all levels of government working together. Far too much time is taken trying to convince people that a particular issue is not yours to resolve. More often than not, solutions come from all levels of government working together. Liberals have a real plan to invest in Canada, to invest in our communities, and ultimately, we have a real plan that will create jobs. Our riding deserves the care and attention that only a full-time MP with real roots in the Simcoe-Grey community can give. I grew up here, raised my family here, and I'm proud to work and live in Simcoe-Grey. I have 17 years of municipal political experience, with the last 11 years as mayor and a Simcoe County councillor for New Tecumseh, which is Alliston, Beaton, and Tottenham. I have good, on-the-ground, practical knowledge of what our communities need. I spent a great deal of time fighting for rural health care, the need for educational opportunities for our kids, and ensuring that the needs of rural Ontario were not forgotten. I have a strong, inclusive leadership style. I'm invested in Simcoe County, and I'm there for you. And hopefully on October 19th, I can count on your support. Thank you.
Mike MacEachern from the Liberal Party of Canada. Simcoe-Grey riding has a fifth candidate in this election. Representing the Christian Heritage Party is Mr. Noordegraaf. Mr. Noordegraaf was not available to be here tonight, but was invited by the Wasaga Beach Chamber of Commerce. We will now move to individual questions from our media panel. Candidates will have 1 minute to respond to the individual questions. The other candidates will also have a minute each, should they choose to respond to that question as well. Our first question comes from Marion McLeod, News Director at 97.7 The Beach. Jim, we need audio for the media panel.
Oh, now it's working.
There we go.
My question is for Dave Matthews of the NDP. The Harper government is currently negotiating what is called the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a multilateral trade deal which could transform Canada's economy more than NAFTA did, more than the US-Canadian free trade deal did back in the 1980s. Tell me your party's stand on Trans-Pacific Partnership, since it appears to be, at this point, a choice between ending supply management for our dairy and poultry farmers or continuing to force consumers to pay higher prices for dairy and poultry products than our American cousins do.
Right now, our party is against that trade agreement if it has any effect on our agriculture, period. Our party doesn't believe in free trade. We believe in fair trade. We don't think that we should sign any trade agreement with any country or organization unless we can protect our agriculture, manufacturing, and our natural resources. The Harper government has gone consistently signing private deals with companies. As we see with China now, we don't even have control over our own economy. They can actually sue us if we try to stop them from working in this country.
Thank you, David Matthews. Dr. Kellie Leitch.
I want to be very clear with regards to the Trans-Pacific Partnership and supply management. Our government has always and will continue to support the 3 pillars of supply management. The individuals that are farmers in this riding and across the country deserve our support. They feed Canadians, they feed the world, and we will continue to support them. But the economy is job number 1 for us, and this free trade deal is an opportunity, a tremendous opportunity for Canada, and at the negotiating table we will make sure that this deal is in the best interest of all Canadians. But I will reiterate, and I will be very clear. We support supply management. We have stated that consistently, and we will continue to do so.
Thank you, Dr. Leitch. David Matthews. Oh, sorry. Mike MacEachern.
Thanks very much. The Liberal Party, of course, is in favor of creating jobs and expanding markets for our industry. I think the issue really here is the secretive nature in which these deals are being undertaken. The farmers that I talk to in our riding are very upset. They're not sure what's happening. And in addition to that, we have a large manufacturing base in the auto manufacturing facilities down in the south part of the riding. So part of this deal talks about the amount of parts that basically have to be made in Canada that will be part of that auto manufactured in our area. And I think all of them are worried, and they're worried. It's about the way that this Conservative government undertakes negotiating on behalf of the industry. It needs to involve them and not be so secretive.
Thank you, Mike MacEachern. JoAnne Fleming.
Thank you very much. I too want to point out the extreme level of secrecy that these negotiations have been carried under. It is totally unacceptable to all Canadians to be negotiating our future and our children's future in secret. I was in Ottawa back in the 80s, 90s, whenever the NAFTA program was put through, protesting that one, and I strongly disagree with this program that is wanting to sacrifice our industries, our agricultural culture, and our whole future here in Canada. We cannot give away in negotiation in secret on anything. The public must be involved, and we must have a
Thank you, JoAnne Fleming.
Secrets. Thank you.
Our next media question will be from Ian Adams, reporter with the Wasaga and Stainer Sun newspaper.
Thank you, John. My question is to Dr. Leitch. In the Metroland newspapers, you indicated that you didn't support the idea of medical marijuana. And I wonder how you would reckon that position with the fact that we have 2 medical marijuana facilities in our riding, and if those 2 companies came to you with an issue at the federal level, would you go to bat for them?
I want to be very clear. Marijuana.
I can't hear.
Marijuana is harmful to children. We know that a developing brain can be impacted beyond belief. So whether that's the development of schizophrenia as a child, or bipolar disorder, we know that that has long-lasting effects for them into their future. And that is why marijuana is an illegal drug. Now, Health Canada makes choices, qualified scientists make choices with respect to medical marijuana when it is available, and Health Canada has a responsibility to provide licensure to those facilities. But there is a process, and the process has to be followed. I encourage those companies to speak to Health Canada with respect to what they want to do, but I want to be crystal clear. As a physician, marijuana is an illegal drug for a reason. And unlike Justin Trudeau, who wants to make smoking marijuana a household thing where you can buy items just like you can buy
Dr. Leitch.
alcohol or smoking cigarettes, we will not allow it.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Dr. Leitch. Mike MacEachern.
The Liberal Party is interested in facts, is interested in what scientists have to say, and is very committed to unmuzzling scientists and allowing facts to be part of the decision-making process. A recent World Health Organization report revealed that Canada has the highest teen usage of marijuana amongst countries surveyed. That's with the current rules in place. This system is clearly broken, and I haven't heard anything from the Conservative government about how to fix it, but I have heard from the Liberals that they think there's a better way to protect our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike MacEachern. David Matthews.
Our party opinion on marijuana is the fact that, A, let's face it, the Liberals want to legalize marijuana because they know there's a ton of tax money to be made in it. That's all their interest really is. Our party believes in decriminalizing small portions of it, but not legalizing it. We can't keep cigarettes and alcohol out of kids' hands. How would we ever keep marijuana out? I don't care what anybody says. Until they can develop a system where kids can't get the drug, then I would consider legalizing it. Also, I think the Conservatives have failed us miserably by not enacting laws that put the people who are pushing this stuff away for longer periods of time with bigger fines. If it's going to be illegal, let's start doing something.
Thank you, David Matthews. JoAnne Fleming.
The Green Party wishes to decriminalize marijuana because the government is spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars on the whole criminalization of marijuana. It will be decriminalized with the Green Party, but it will be strictly controlled and will not be available to anyone under the age of 18. It will also be available for those with medical use, and I am pleased that medical marijuana has a process to be made available for those who can benefit from pain relief from the use of medical marijuana.
Thank you, JoAnne Fleming. Our next question will come from Penny Skelton, host of Penny Skelton Show on Rogers TV.
I've been pointed out by several people when I came in, this is not Liberal red, this is Rogers red. So I'd just like to clarify that. My question is for JoAnne Fleming of the Green Party. If elected, I don't want party platforms, but if elected, what do you consider is the #1 priority for the riding of Simcoe-Grey, and why?
For me, the #1 priority would be to ensure that our natural resources are being restored and sustained. And by that, I mean our water. We need to reinstall the Navigation Act so that our major rivers are under federal jurisdiction once again, so the waters flowing down the Noordegraaf and the Beaver as two of our major rivers are definitely covered, because now that those rivers are out of it, there are already violations from conversation with the Conservation Authority staff person just this weekend, that the Conservation Authority and the municipalities either do not have the ability or do not have the authority to do anything about. So that would be my #1, because all of those rivers flow into Georgian Bay.
Thank you, JoAnne Fleming. Mike MacEachern.
I think the #1 issue issue for me from my experience as a municipal representative. I can't control the microphone, so okay. Sorry. So I think one of the major issues that I see across the riding, I have a fairly lengthy experience municipally, and our infrastructure in our small communities, whether it be affordable housing, whether it be water and wastewater systems, whether it be schools, hospitals, recreation facilities, is in desperate state of need of repair. The Liberal government has committed to making further investments in infrastructure, significant investments in infrastructure, and I can tell you as a mayor, I understand that not only helps with repairing what already needs to be fixed, but it creates jobs locally, and it helps the local economy. So I think that is the #1 issue that we need to address in Simcoe County.
David Matthews?
I think the major concern in this area is jobs. We have a very high unemployment rate, and I think as an MP, it is their responsibility to sit down with the municipal and representative from the Ontario government, take a full inventory of the industry that we have, and look at ways of which ones we should improve on, and also include in that, which nobody seems to even take into account, is the tourism sector, which is very large at the northern end of the riding, our agriculture sector, which is suffering, and then the lower part with industry. And sit with these mayors and come up with a plan that is going to entice industry to come up in this area to create jobs, not just for the people here, but for young people that need them.
Thank you, David Matthews. Dr. Leitch.
So I think the #1 priority is creating jobs, and that has been my focus as a member of Parliament. Very pleased with Trax, who not once but twice has now received specific funding allocations to make sure that young Canadians in this riding in particular receive the skills they need for jobs that are available, or breaking down barriers, where individuals with disabilities again have received skills training so that they can receive jobs here in the local area. The expansion and reopening of the Egnora glass plant, creating jobs in this area, over 120 new jobs here in Simcoe-Grey. I think jobs are the #1 focus. It's my #1 priority. It's our government's #1 priority. The Prime Minister just recently announced a focus of the creation of 1.3 million new jobs by 2020, working with private sector and the public sector across the country. These are the things we need to focus on.
Thank you, Dr. Leitch. Our next media question comes from Katie Harries of the Springwater News.
Thank you. My question is about public access to waterways, in fact, to the Navigation Protection Act, and it's for Kellie Leitch. In 2012, your government replaced the Navigable Waters Protection Act, which guaranteed every Canadian the right to navigation on every navigable river in the country, river and lake, with the Navigation Protection Act, which only covers 100 lakes and 61 rivers, and for the rest, the common law applies. The Noordegraaf River is not one of those rivers. The Noordegraaf Valley Conservation Authority, Simcoe County, and 6 municipalities have all voted in favor of having it included. Would you support including the Noordegraaf River in the Navigation Protection Act?
Well, I actually just yesterday met one of your colleagues while I was canvassing, and we talked exactly about this issue. And I do support her initiative to move forward to working with the federal government about the Noordegraaf becoming a portion of the Navigable Waters Act. I want to be clear, though, that there's more than just that act that will need to be addressed. In order to make sure that we have the Noordegraaf regulated and the areas around it regulated appropriately, not only is the Navigable Waters Act an issue that needs to be dealt with, which I'm happy to work with local constituents on, but also several environmental protection acts. The Environmental Protection Act, the Environmental Assessments Act, the Species at Risk Act, as well as the Fisheries Act. So we need to look at all 5 acts with respect to making sure the appropriate environmental protections are put in place, but also that they're navigable, and we can make sure that the appropriate bridges, if required, or other things can be put in place.
Thank you, Dr. Leitch. David Matthews.
You know, I find that statement amazing considering the fact that the Harper government is the one that scrapped all those acts or cut into them and weakened them all. You know, how can a person sit in front of you and say she supports them when she supported a government that scrapped them? We had 2,500 protected lakes and rivers in this country. Now we're down to 157. And this is all because of the Harper government. So I don't know how anybody can sit here and say she's all for protecting the environment and the rivers and the lakes.
That is not true.
Thank you, David Matthews. Mike MacEachern.
We're on record in writing saying that we would review that act and do a wholesale review. We think it needs to be reviewed. I certainly, when local constituents, when local associations that are guided by the mandate to protect our local rivers are telling the government that that should not happen, that should be a signal to our representative that that should not happen, and it's pretty simple.
Thank you, Mike MacEachern. JoAnne Fleming.
The Harper government has reduced the number and places and situations where an environmental assessment is needed, and the places where they are expecting them is very, very few. A Green Party would insist that environmental assessment be required in any situation that is going to have an impact that needs to be documented, and a decision needs to be made that does document the triple bottom line of environmental impact, human impact, and economic impact.
Thank you, JoAnne Fleming. We turn once again to News Director at 97.7 The Beach, Marianne McLeod.
My question is for candidate MacEachern. There's been a lot of talk during this campaign about recessions and deficits and spending versus tax cuts. And when you left office in New Tecumseh, the municipality had a debt load of somewhere around $53 million. Canada is currently out of deficit, depending on who you believe, but has had 6 straight years of deficit spending, some of those deficits as high as $50 billion. Explain to me how running more deficits would be of benefit to Canada.
Well, I think your point's well taken. It depends on what year you're talking to about whether we're at a deficit or not. I think it's important to understand that infrastructure is an investment. Infrastructure spending is an investment in communities. We all know, in our particular case in New Tecumseh, we have, for one example, about $80 million worth of roads that require repair today. If you multiply that across the municipalities that make up Simcoe-Grey, the number is astounding amount of infrastructure that's required to be replaced. And I think it's important that we invest now, because what we're doing if we don't invest now, we're neglecting the infrastructure deficit that's there, is we're putting it on the backs of the young people that are going to come after us. And we're actually pushing it to our children. They're going to have to pay more for the same kind of infrastructure that needs to be repaired today. So I think we got to stop talking about infrastructure as a bad thing or investment as a bad thing. It's a good thing, creates jobs.
Thank you, Mike MacEachern. JoAnne Fleming. Oh, you did? All right. David Matthews.
I honestly believe that this $5.5 billion deficit you're talking about is untrue. I believe it was reported yesterday that the Liberal deficit would be up around $10 billion a year for each of the next 3 years, which would be $30 billion added on to the $50 billion that the Conservatives and that have run up. You got to remember, this money, this deficit, which the Liberals throw around as being virtually nothing, is going to be on the backs of your grandchildren, your children, for the next decades to pay back. Somebody has to pay this money back. You know, that's why the NDP strongly supports, and we will maintain a balanced budget and still be able to put money where it's required by making sure that corporations start to pay their fair share in taxes, which will cover all the expenses.
Dr. Leitch.
In 2008-9, when the economy lowered because of what was going on globally, and we still sit in a fragile global economy, Jim Flaherty made a decision to make sure that the economy remained strong and that Canadians were employed. They would have jobs. He said that there would be a medium-term back to a balanced budget, which is exactly where we're at. In fact, just announced a few weeks ago a $1.9 billion surplus to add to what was already a surplus this year. The Prime Minister has also just announced that we will maintain our balanced budget legislation, as well as no tax increases in the next 4 years. It's a very different approach than the Liberal Party, running deficits, which will add to taxation on Canadians. The NDP that have already said they're going to increase your taxes, and I think we all know the track record of the Ontario NDP and the number of jobs that were lost because of that. We're very focused on making sure Canadians have jobs and maintaining a balanced budget.
Thank you, Dr. Leitch. Our next question comes from Ian Adams from the Wasaga Sun newspaper. Media, Mike.
Thanks. Directing this to JoAnne Fleming. It's actually a question from a reader of the paper about the potential or a proposal to put a radioactive waste facility at Kincardine, which is about less than 2 kilometers from the Great Lakes, given that we are on the Great Lakes here. What's your party's position on that?
The Green Party does not support the development of nuclear energy. And
this is a radioactive waste facility or a nuclear waste facility.
Yes, I realize that. In order to create nuclear energy, you create nuclear waste. And at the present time, if anyone were to Google what is the source of your hydro in Ontario at any given hour, about 50% is nuclear at this time. The use of nuclear is described by many as being efficient, but it has a huge, huge risk associated with it, and I personally and many others have a huge distrust of the safety nets that are there to protect us as citizens, and those fears about the safety would apply also to any kind of storage facility. Okay.
Thank you, JoAnne Fleming. Dr. Leitch?
The Government of Canada has a number of initiatives for waste cleanup, whether that be nuclear facilities or otherwise. We will continue to support them.
Mike MacEachern?
A key plank of the Liberal government is to make sure that we're listening to the scientists that the Government of Canada pays for, that we are making decisions based on facts and not making politically expedient decisions based on where we want to go, but rather listening to the scientists that will allow us to make the best decisions on behalf of Canadians. And of course, we want to protect the Great Lakes and our freshwater basins. They need to be protected, and a Liberal government is committed to that.
Thank you, Mike MacEachern. David Matthews.
The NDP government would oppose such action to put a waste dump for radioactive material so close to a lake. I personally, if I'm elected, I would go through hell to stop this. I've worked in that field. No matter what the Conservatives say, there's no cleanup process for radiation. Look at Genova, look at Japan. These places are dead. You know, you can't clean this stuff up. Once it gets into the ground, that's it. 1,000 years, you can't use that stuff. So I don't know where the Conservatives can say they can clean it up, because you cannot. You can just control it. And I'm dead against it.
Thank you, David Matthews. Host of Penny Skelton's show on Rogers TV, Penny Skelton.
Thank you. My show is a community-based show, and I've had a lot of people phoning me and telling me I should do a show about the situation in Syria, and I go, okay. But their point is there are citizens and there are organizations throughout all of Simcoe-Grey currently holding fundraisers waiting for the opportunity to sponsor bringing Syrian refugees over. So I would like to know, what is your position on the Syrian refugee crisis, and what are you going to do about it?
Is that directed to me?
Oh, I'm sorry. Sure, JoAnne.
All right, thank you. Elizabeth May has responded by saying that she has dealt with 2 families and worked through the system trying to reunite those families with someone who was in Syria, and was appalled by the complexity and the length of time that it took for those people to be processed and for those families to be reunited. The first thing that the Green Party would do would be to streamline that process and make sure that it doesn't take nearly as long, and of course the proper checks and balances in it to ensure that everyone that is allowed into the country does not have any connections to ISIS or other organizations that we don't want in this country. So the first thing would be to streamline. The second is to work with, to appoint someone. Okay, thank you.
David Matthews.
The one thing the NDP will not do is use fear tactics to slow this process down. Our aim is to get 9,000 of them over here. I don't believe orphan children and mothers with children are terrorist factors. You know, the Harper government has been using the excuse that they got to check for terrorists all the way through this, and they're taking no action, and that's not Canada's identity.
Dr. Leitch.
Thank you very much. I just want everyone to be aware, and it's something I think that we should all be very proud as Canadians, is that we've made investments of over $750 million in humanitarian aid to individuals in Syria and Iraq. Second, we are speeding up the process for refugees coming into the country, devoting extra staff. In fact, we're doubling the number of individuals on the ground as we speak to make sure that the processing is done more efficiently and effectively, at the same time as maintaining our security screening and medical screening, which is important. I want to be clear, though, we're very focused on making sure individuals are processed appropriately. To date, more appropriately, since September the 2nd, of the number of Syrian refugees that Canada has said we will accept, over 2,400 were already here in Canada on September the 2nd. And of the Iraqi refugees, over 22,000 of the 23,000 were here as of September the 2nd as well. These are important things for you to know.
Thank you. Mike MacEachern.
The Liberal government's clearly on record indicating that we will take on 25,000 refugees, government-sponsored refugees. We'll invest in processing refugees as it's been cut back by the Harper government. And I think generally when we start to watch news reports of past chiefs of defense saying, listen, Canada's got to get away from being afraid of its shadow. It has in the past been able to take refugees in during crises. We have the skill, we have the people that can do it, and we have the professionals that are able to do it in a safe way, protecting Canadian safety. But to use that as a reason not to accept more refugees into Canada is ridiculous.
Thank you, Mike MacEachern. From the Springwater News, Katie Harries.
My question is for Mike MacEachern, and it's about the importance of good data to underpin evidence-based decisions. With the cancellation of the mandatory long-form census, some communities have actually dropped off the map. The consequences are being felt by governments at all levels and the private sector alike. The Canadian Medical Association, the Canadian Institute of Planners, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce are among those who have called for the reinstatement of the mandatory long-form census. Would a Liberal government bring the mandatory long-form census back?
It's a simple answer, yes.
Kellie Leitch.
Well, the government's been clear. We're not bringing back the long-form census. We received data from numerous different data points and made that available to Canadians.
Thank you. David Matthews.
It'd be a simple yes.
JoAnne Fleming.
The Green Party would definitely reinstate the long census because people have the right in decision-making positions to know who they are supposed to be serving, and the long census provides that information. And losing communities is just totally unacceptable in a short census.
Thank you. Another question from Marion McLeod, 97.7 The Beach FM.
Since a campaign is a lot like a job interview, I'm going to pose to you a question that is often asked during job interviews. Dr. Leitch, I'll expect you to describe the boss you currently have, and Mr. MacEachern, some of the bosses that you have had previously, and JoAnne and Dave the same. Describe for us a time that you disagreed with your boss and you managed to change their mind and prevail in an argument.
Is that directed to anyone in particular?
I imagine they'll all want to answer, but we'll start with Dr. Leitch since she sits at the cabinet table.
Sure. My voting record is clear. I have a different opinion with regards to transgender rights than the Prime Minister. I voted against on the private member's bill supporting equal rights for all Canadians.
David Matthews.
I think I disagree with my boss 90% of the time. The only time I can really remember disagreeing with a boss and then changing my mind was with Jack Layton. The one time I had a conversation with him on the phone, and he wanted to expand affordable housing into a very rich area, which I thought wasn't the best thing in the world, but he was able to persuade me that it would be good because poverty is something that everybody should see, and I agreed with him.
JoAnne Fleming.
I've been self-employed much of the time, so I don't have to answer to a boss as often as when you do have a boss. However, I have responded to a situation whereby I was asked to waive a student's inappropriate behavior, and I said that I was prepared not to do that, and I was able to find a direction in which I was able to deal with the student, deal with the institution, and it was not the best response, but it was something I was much more satisfied with.
Thank you, JoAnne. Mike MacEachern.
I've been in a management job for quite a while, so I can only suggest to you that how I approach leadership is an inclusive style of leadership where I find that I don't have the best answer, but I think when we involve people in the discussion that we get to an answer that can work for everybody. And in a lot of cases, even municipally as a mayor, I walked into rooms full of residents around a particular issue, and I had a certain idea about where I thought it should go. And quite often after I was finished, we got generally in that direction. But you know what? People have good ideas, and I think as a leader, your responsibility is to listen to people and to find a way forward that makes sense, and you have to be open to change your way.
Thank you, Mike MacEachern. Our next media question comes from Ian Adams, reporter with the Wasaga and Stainer Sun newspaper.
And this is directed to Mike MacEachern. Mr. MacEachern, obviously you've seen municipal-federal relations from the municipal side for quite a while. Looking at it from the federal side, how would you improve that relationship? Should you be successful on the 19th?
An underlying, and part of what drew me to run federally was that I think I was tired of levels of government pointing at other levels of government saying it's not our problem, it's your problem, it's not our issue to deal with, because I don't think that's what a resident wants to hear. I don't think that's what a taxpayer wants to hear. They want to hear that you're going to resolve that issue. And I think that's what we need to get to. We need to have cooperation by all levels of government working on solutions, because a lot of times the issues that are brought to us by residents transfer over many levels of government. And we have certain examples of that in our own communities that are here. We've talked about one earlier about the Navigable Waters Act that was removed, or at least the Nottawasaga River was removed from it. There are other examples of airports being built, and the only response we get is it's not our problem, it's your problem, municipality, you fix it, and we need to get away from that.
Thank you, Mike MacEachern. Kellie Leitch.
I think working with our provincial as well as municipal partners is extremely important. And as Minister of Labour as well as Minister of Status of Women, that's what I've done. With my colleagues at Labour in particular, not only do we have an annual federal, provincial, territorial meeting now, we actually have regular conference calls, regular video conferences in an effort to come to conclusions together on what's in the best interest of Canadian workers. That's exactly how I believe we should be moving forward. A collaborative exercise where individuals at the municipal level, so by way of example, working with municipalities at Status of Women Canada, we've just funded over $500,000 to work with them across the country to encourage more women to run for office and provide them the skills to do so. So working together, I think, is exactly the right direction, and that's what I do as a minister every day at Status of Women and at Labour. And I do that here as a member of Parliament as well.
Thank you, Dr. Leitch. David Matthews.
I think the whole key to anything is cooperation and dialogue. All three levels of government have to, for any situation, it doesn't matter if it's jobs, the environment, development, anything, you've got to have dialogue from all three areas, and they have to work together. The problem in Simcoe-Grey is we've seen massive expansion of housing with no environmental studies on anything. They're building on #1 farmland. We have reports of people's wells going dry because they suck the water table dry, areas where they're getting bad water now because they don't think of the infrastructure before they do these developments. So I think all three governments got to, all three sections got to sit down and discuss this stuff and make sure the funding's there for the infrastructure as you do development.
Thank you, David Matthews. JoAnne Fleming.
The Green Party wants to govern in a very nonpartisan way. The Green Party wants to govern in a way that has everyone working, communicating together. The model that currently exists, in which Mr. Harper doesn't wish to speak to Premier Wynne, is not an acceptable way to govern. We have to work together, and yes, there have to be compromises at all levels, but we have to base our discussion on science, we have to base it on need, and we have to be responsible and respectful to one another in all of these talks.
Our next question comes from Penny Skelton of Rogers Television, Rogers TV.
Rogers Community TV, too. And this is Rogers Red. I keep reiterating if anybody's just tuning in. I'd like to direct my question to Mr. Matthews of the NDP. Once elected, what will you do to strengthen the economy of Simcoe-Grey? And with only 1 minute to answer, please give me one specific example.
To strengthen the economy, well, the first thing the NDP would do is stop giving corporations that make billions of dollars profit our tax money and use that money to create jobs, to put back into veterans funds, to make sure that seniors have money to spend, because it seems that both the Liberals and the Conservatives have forgotten that it's you, the people of Canada, that drive the economy, not the corporations.
Thank you, David. JoAnne Fleming.
The Green Party would implement a system of support to our local farmers, in which we are looking at markets that are local, regional, Ontario, Canada, rather than really pursuing the international market so much, because the footprint to ship potatoes, for example, a long distance really doesn't make sense. What are the value-added products that we can create? And the government would certainly support research and development and promotion of value-added products that are being produced in this area. And another part of that is the importance of preserving the topsoil that is so valuable to agriculture. There's far too much of our topsoil being washed downstream and into the bay after each storm. And as a part of the development and planning for a sustainable future, we need to preserve our topsoil programs as well.
Thank you, JoAnne Fleming. Dr. Kellie Leitch.
Number one priority would be reducing small business taxes. The lifeblood of Simcoe-Grey are small and medium-sized businesses. When they have more money back in their pockets, the owners, they actually pass that on to the individuals that work with them. In addition, making sure that Canadian families overall have money back in their pockets through the universal child care benefit, maintaining it. We've doubled it for children under 6, and created a new benefit for parents with children 6 to 17, something both the NDP and the Liberals have said they'll take away. We're about money back in people's pockets, lowering taxes for small businesses, particularly in this region, because they're the lifeblood of this economy in this area, and also making sure families have money to spend as well.
Thank you, Dr. Leitch. Mike MacEachern.
I think the number one thing that needs to be done is cutting income taxes for the middle class. While I agree reducing the income tax on, or the tax on small business is important as well, I think that will have the biggest benefit to our local economy. Unlike the Conservatives and the NDP, we propose a Canada Child benefit, which is tax-free, provides more money to the people that need it, and actually lifts 315,000 children out of poverty. So I am deeply committed to the Canada Child benefit and a middle income tax cut.
Thank you, Mike MacEachern. Our final media question comes from Kate Harries of the Springwater News.
My question is for Kellie Leitch, and it's about funding for First Nations schools. The discrepancy between what the federal government has to pay for First Nations students who attend provincial schools and those who are funded at schools on reserve is in the order of several $1,000s a year, almost as about 50% per student, one way or the other. And the Truth and Reconciliation Commission asked for this to be addressed. What would you see, how would you do that?
The Government of Canada had moved forward with $1.9 billion for First Nations education. The AFN said no. We do need to make sure that these young Canadians are all educated. And so we are now, through the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development, working with each individual band to see what can be best done on each one of their reserves. Minister Valcourt, I think, is doing an outstanding job working one-on-one, reserve after reserve, to make sure that First Canadian children have an opportunity to access to education. It's the best opportunity for them in the future. We need them to be skilled and educated so that they can contribute to Canada's workforce in the future, and we're determined to make sure that they have that education.
Thank you, Dr. Leitch. David Matthews.
That was a very nice speech, but I don't think I would trust it, considering the fact that the Harper government has spent over $100 million fighting the First Nations in court. And as of to date, they still haven't cooperated with them, so why would they help them now? It's very nice to hear all this stuff during an election year.
JoAnne Fleming.
The education and services for Indigenous people being raised to a level that gives them the dignity that they are entitled to is a very high priority for the Green Party. The education of these Native children, Indigenous children, is also affected by the quality of their housing, the quality of their water, even if they have running water, and the quality of life in their communities that are in such distress. So when we talk about education for the Indigenous people, it's a very high priority for the Green Party, but also the support that they need to raise their communities up and give them the dignity that they are deserve.
Mike MacEachern.
Well, a common theme here is we need to develop a better relationship with First Nations. We've talked about better relationships with provinces, municipalities. We've talked about that this evening. The Liberal government doesn't think that the Indigenous community should have to wait one more day for better support for their educational system. You know, the Conservative government have promised a lot. They left $1 billion on the table, basically, in lapsed funding for First Nations education. And the Liberal government is committed to a total new investment of $2.6 billion over the next 4 years, and also investing $500 million in education facilities. So there's a need to do it. There's a need to do it now. We can't wait, and it should be a priority.
Thank you, Mike MacEachern. Please join me in thanking our media panel for an excellent job this evening. Thank you. We are here at the Wasaga Beach Recplex. It is the Wasaga Beach Chamber of Commerce All Candidates meeting. We are here talking to the candidates for the October 19th election, and we're talking about things that matter here in Simcoe County, Simcoe-Grey. Joining us now, we have some questions from our illustrious audience here at the Wasaga Beach Recplex. This one comes to us from Teresa Glover. JoAnne Fleming, we'll start with you. You have 1 minute to answer this question based on the status of women. Would you support a vote against a national action plan to admit violence against women? The question again, would you support a vote against a national action plan to admit violence against women?
There's a lot of negatives and positives in there. Let's just put it this way. I would support immediately legislation to support anything that will stop violence against women, Native women and non-Native women. We've just had several women murdered near Ottawa just this week. So we're talking violence against women is totally unacceptable. Women should be able to walk the streets without fear, and we need to make sure that this happens now. We just keep giving it lip service, and this whole culture of violence against women seems to be a subset that just continues to flourish, and we need programs that will shift that.
Thank you, JoAnne. David Matthews.
I have a very good answer to that. That is actually a piece of legislation that the NDP put on the floor of the House of Commons, which the Conservatives, as a group, whole body and everything, voted against it. The NDP is adamant that we have to do something about the violence against women, plus also we are adamant that we have to put the funding back to the women's grassroots organizations that are fighting for their equality, which the Harper government cut. The Harper government has put women's issues back at least 30 years. And I don't understand why, considering the fact that the cabinet minister for the status of women has supported all this stuff, which just bewilders me.
Thank you, David. Dr. Leitch.
The Government of Canada has put forward 30 pieces of legislation to make sure that women are safer and that children are safer on Canadian streets. The opposition parties, which are represented here, have voted against all of these things. Most appalling was the vote against S7, Aboriginal property rights for women. The NDP and the Liberals felt that it was not appropriate for Canadian Aboriginal women to have their own property rights. In fact, they vote against all of these initiatives that would make Canadian women safer on the streets. We continue to increase funding. In fact, status of women funding for violence against women and girls is at the highest it's ever been in Canadian history. I'm proud of that record, and they fund local community projects.
Thank you, Dr. Leitch. Mike MacEachern.
I found the question a little confusing as well. As a community activist and somebody that's been involved in our community, and certainly with our local shelters, anything that's going to support those community agencies to assist people that are in that circumstance, I certainly support. I think, again, we go back to the level of cooperation. We need a level of cooperation between the federal government and those people serving directly people that are in these situations, women in particular, and that's the way that we need to go forward. So that would be my answer to that question.
Thank you. We'll start with David Matthews on this next question from our audience. Do you support Bill C-51?
No, I do not. The NDP government, within the first 100 days, will repeal that bill. That is a direct bill, affects our rights. Under that bill, if you should, and it really affects the First Nations, because under that bill, if they demonstrate against a pipeline going through their territory that they disagree with because there's no environmental studies, they're classified as terrorists. When you really read that bill in depth, it takes a lot of our rights away. That bill is worse than the American Patriot Act. There is no outside people to say whether you can or cannot do that. Even the Supreme Court has said it violates rights. You know, every judge in the country has been against it. And yet the Harper government put it in there because, as far as he is concerned, the same thing that Bush told the American people, everybody better check under their bed at nights for terrorists. And that's what he's using to keep Canadian people from doing what Canada does best.
Thank you, David Matthews. Dr. Kellie Leitch.
I supported Bill C-51, the Anti-Terrorism Act, and the reason for that is that our world now is a dangerous place, and Canada is not immune to those threats. Terrorist attacks have taken place on Canadian soil, and we need to protect Canadians. So what does this act do? This act actually does a number of things to counter radicalization of young people and allow their family members and community members to identify it. It allows us to stop terrorists from traveling on airplanes with Canadians. And it allows information sharing amongst police, RCMP, and other levels of government, things to protect Canadians. We're very focused on making sure Canadians are safe, and we'll continue to have that focus, because without safety and security, we actually don't have liberty in this country.
Mike MacEachern.
I guess on C-51, the candidates up here that are not part of the government right now are a little bit of a disadvantage because we had no opportunity to influence that bill at all. There's only one person that can vote for that on this stage, and we've heard that she voted with the government on that particular bill. My background is in as a chair of a police services board as well, and I believe in working with our security services in order to make sure that they have the tools they need to be able to keep us safe. I believe that in civilian oversight of security services as well, and I know that when the Liberals proposed a number of amendments to the Act, which the NDP voted against, a part of that was for greater civilian oversight of our security services. So I certainly agree with working with security and working with the police associations and keeping us safe. So thank you.
Thank you, Mike MacEachern. JoAnne Fleming.
The Green Party would certainly reverse C-51. We certainly do want to be safe, but I believe that the level of security that is imposed by this bill is totally unacceptable. There is no reason for the average citizen to be under full surveillance for whatever their media, their association, or their activity, because they are doing what they believe in. We should be able to have the right to peacefully protest something that we disagree with in this country. It is unacceptable that it should be anything. It is unacceptable that we cannot peacefully protest something that we do not believe is good for our community and our country.
Thank you, JoAnne Fleming. Our next question comes from Kathy Biss. It's directed to start with to Dr. Kellie Leitch. The subject is asbestos. I've heard a lot of back and forth about the government's position on asbestos. Dr. Leitch, can you please tell us what the Conservative Party position on asbestos is?
So I want to address some of the misinformation that has been distributed by the opposition. The Government of Canada, through experts at Health Canada, has stated that asbestos is a dangerous and carcinogenic material. I agree with that as a physician. All asbestos mines in Canada are now closed. Canada no longer produces asbestos for domestic use, nor does it export it. This is something that happened under a Conservative government. Liberals had decades to act on this file, and successive governments from Trudeau to Martin did absolutely nothing. Furthermore, for the first time, Canada did not oppose the listing of crystalline asbestos in the Rotterdam Convention. This is a dangerous material, and we're treating it as such. And I, as a physician, am proud to be part of a government and part of a cabinet that finally moved forward, taking action as I have.
Mike MacEachern.
I guess, unfortunately, they dragged their heels a little bit on this, and also, didn't address the issue of the fact that they were exporting to the countries where the people there were handling it and didn't have the health protection they required in order to handle it. So again, a Conservative government after tremendous pressure from the public, reverses a decision to allow it to continue, and then says, look at us, we're doing a good work, we've stopped asbestos.
While a Trudeau government and a Martin government did nothing.
JoAnne Fleming. Would you like to respond to this question as well?
Yes, please. Thank you. Exporting a health risk to other people in other countries is just as bad as exporting our toxic waste or any other product. It is unconscionable to be doing that, and we should, as Canadians, should not be doing that, nor would we want to be known for doing that.
Thank you, JoAnne. David Matthews.
I don't know, maybe I'm just as confused as you are. We're told that a government is really concerned about asbestos and they're going to make it totally safe for Canadians and everything else. But it's quite all right to send it to third world countries where they probably don't have any guidance of how to use this particular product. You know, this makes no sense to me at all. Somebody's just not telling the truth on this.
Thank you, David. Our next question is directed to Mike MacEachern. The subject is the War Measures Act. Would you support the War Measures Act as did Pierre Trudeau did in 1970 when 465 people were arrested and held without being charged? Mike MacEachern.
Well, you know, a difficult question to answer. You know, I certainly believe in the liberty of people. I believe in people's freedom. Personally, I don't believe in holding people without cause. I think we live in a society now where we're too frightened of our own, as I said, of our own shadows, that we think there's somebody hiding under every rock anywhere. And we need to become more aggressive as Canadians, or assertive, better, as Canadians around our own rights. So I'm not sure I've answered your question as directly as you'd like, but that's what I have.
Dr. Leitch?
Well, as I said earlier, I think without safety and security, we don't have liberty. And we will, in the future, potentially find ourselves in a circumstance where if we allow our safety and security to be eroded, that we're allowing things to happen on Canadian soil that would be exceptionally unfortunate. We're not immune here in Canada to ever-evolving threats from abroad. And so, as I said before and earlier, that without safety and security, we do not have liberty here. It is the government's responsibility to provide that, and we're doing exactly that.
David Matthews.
The War Measures Act, that's kind of drastic. We don't really need it now because it's got Bill C-51, which pretty well handles all that. I strongly believe, we've never had a terrorist attack in Canada. The FLQ was a radical group in Quebec that overreacted, and I think the government of the day overreacted to that crisis. But we've never had a terrorist attack. The two attacks, the one attack that happened in Quebec where a soldier got run over, and in Ottawa where a soldier got shot and the guy went into the Parliament building and shot the place up, they weren't terrorist acts. They were acts of individuals who had a little bit of, let's say, they were a little bit off-center, okay? And the thing is, the Mounties knew about the one guy and failed to act. You know, so all these theories that the government throws at us is just Bushonomics to make us feel afraid. You know, Canada is a safe country. You know, our own police force stopped the bombing of...
Thank you, David Matthews. JoAnne Fleming.
I believe Canada is a safe country as well. Yes, there are likely a few individuals in this country that could be threatening to us, but I believe they are very small. The War Measures Act was an overreaction without enough information, and the Green Party is a party that wants to solve issues in as peaceful ways as possible. It wants to be able to look at the full situation and not bring out all of the heavy artillery, and to be bringing people into custody without any recourse is unacceptable to the Green Party.
Thank you. JoAnne, we'll start with you with this next question. The subject is the omnibus bill. Would you vote for an omnibus bill?
Excuse me, could you repeat that?
Would you vote for an omnibus bill?
No, I would not vote for an omnibus bill. All voters in this country, all citizens in this country have the right to believe that their representatives are going to be discussing all parts of a bill before the Commons. An omnibus bill is totally unacceptable as a way to pass legislation.
David Matthews.
The NDP party has voted against every budget that the Conservative Party has put into the House of Commons because of these bills. If you cannot take a bill and discuss it in the House, if you have to hide it behind a budget to get it passed, there must be something drastically wrong with these bills. And the Conservative government has been doing it ever since Harper got into power, and this is something that we as a party would not allow, and we would put out legislation in to stop this practice.
Dr. Kellie Leitch.
So each of the budget bills has been taken apart and actually discussed at subcommittees of the House of Commons. More in-depth evaluations of those component parts of the budget bills at subcommittees. In fact, I sat for literally 96 hours on and off on portions of this budget, of many of our budget bills at the Finance Committee. They get discussed thoroughly, and it's important that that occurs. Now, what is also important for all of you to know is that Liberal governments and Conservative governments have done this in an effort to make sure that important legislation passes. By way of example, as Minister of Labour, the new reforms for interns to make sure they have occupational health and safety in the workplace only passed because of an omnibus bill. It was embedded in the budget, passed, and then efficiently enacted to make sure young Canadians are safe in the workplace. These are important things to get through the House of Commons.
Thank you, Dr. Leitch. Mike MacEachern.
Simple answer to this one, we'd end the abuse of omnibus bills and prorogation of Parliament.
Thank you. We'll direct this next question to David Matthews. It's from Elsie Garner. She writes, what are you going to do about jobs in this area?
What I would do if I'm elected, I would sit down with the municipalities, all the mayors, get Jim Wilson or your MPP involved, take an inventory of everything that we have, see which areas or which companies would be best to try to expand in. I'd also take a look at agriculture to expand in that. The NDP is the only party that has a national food policy which involves agriculture so that we can get processing plants in these areas and processing Canadian food for Canadians at Canadian prices. I would also look to put money into our tourism section. And the one thing that gets no funding, and it was actually cut by the Conservatives, is the arts. This area has an enormous amount of talent in the arts, and we don't use it, and they get no federal funding to do anything with it. And that is something that I would fight for, to get that funding so our arts would be able to create jobs in this area.
Thank you, David Matthews. Dr. Leitch.
Creation of jobs in this area is extremely important. As I mentioned before, it's my top priority. The Prime Minister has made an announcement of the creation of 1.3 million net new jobs by 2020. There are three things to concentrate on in order to achieve that. First and foremost, what's been invested on already in this area and will continue to be under my leadership is training, making sure that young Canadians in particular, but also older Canadians, have the skills they need for jobs available here. So whether that be tracks, or breaking down barriers, other initiatives to train people. Trade, expansion of trade markets. At Honda, we're now building the CRV for Europe because of the Canada-Europe trade agreement, a creation of jobs and opportunities for Canadians in this riding, and lowering taxes. When you decrease taxes on small businesses, it lets them actually keep more money in their pocket, invest in their business, grow their business, and hire more Canadians. It's about creating jobs.
Thank you, Kellie Leitch. Mike MacEachern.
I'll go back to a recurring theme is working with the local municipalities, local levels of government. They all have economic development strategies. They're all interested in making sure that they're developing good quality jobs close to home. They've done a lot of work. They need assistance. They need help from the federal government and the provincial government. You know, when I left my riding or my municipality in New-Tecumseth, Honda of Canada made an investment of over $800 million in the Honda plant. The province came with money to support that investment. The federal government was absent. The next week, they were in a different riding that was one that they thought, the Conservatives thought they could capture, and suddenly they were there with an equal investment to the province. And I think we need to start investing in Simcoe-Grey and supporting the businesses that are here.
Thank you, Mike. JoAnne Fleming.
Small business and entrepreneurship is the biggest hope for development in this area, and they need more support from the federal government, and they also need a less paperwork and regulation so that the taxation and all of there's no overlap, and it's much more efficient because there isn't time to do the tremendous amount that's associated with small business now. I believe that a big part of the development of tourism in this area has to do with the development of a transit link to Collingwood area. We have a huge bottleneck of traffic on 400 with people going north on the weekends, and people don't come to the beach anymore. They don't come skiing anymore because of the traffic. And by having a transit link from the Greater Toronto area up here with the proper networks out of transit, that would be a big step towards creating more jobs in this area.
Thank you, JoAnne. Our next question is regarding transfer payments. It's from Tony Biss, directed to Kellie Leitch. Is it true that the Conservative government slashed transfer payments to the provinces?
Absolutely not. So the transfer payments year on year were set out in a budget by Jim Flaherty in 2013. A 6% escalator on healthcare and a 4% escalator on social transfers until 2024. So let's be clear. Healthcare, 6% increase until 2016, then a 4% increase year on year till 2024. In fact, for the province of Ontario, that's an increased transfer of multiple billions of dollars from what they had in the past. The same on social services, an increase of 4% year on year till 2016, and then to match GDP. We've moved forward with a balanced budget, making sure transfer payments are increased to the provinces so they can do their jobs. Very different than the Liberal approach where they slash transfer payments to the provinces when they were given the opportunity to actually increase them.
Mike MacEachern.
You know what? There needs to be a greater cooperation between the federal government and the provincial government, especially when we look at health care. You know, into the future, healthcare costs continue to rise. Our aging population continues to rely on medical services to a higher degree, and I think, you know, what we need to reinstill from the federal government is a willingness to be cooperative with the provinces. One of the largest provinces, Ontario. We've heard from this government that they are not going to play ball with Ontario. They're not going to work with Ontario to do the things that Ontarians want, or Ontarians want. And I think we need to change that attitude.
JoAnne Fleming.
The news that I hear is the transfer of payments from federal to provincial isn't very effective, and when you have the Prime Minister saying refusing to talk to the provincial premier, it doesn't seem to make much sense that this is a very efficient operation as it operates now. We have we have a situation in terms of our health care, for example, in this community where there's a high demand for our hospital services, our emergency services, by many, many visitors and skiers to the area, and it's very difficult to transfer that higher level of usage of our hospital facilities with the current formulas that are in place that are really having to service a lot more people, and we don't have enough beds.
David Matthews.
For a government that refuses to sit down with the provinces, you know, and they announced earlier that they were going to cut $36 billion from health care in 2 years. I don't understand where these transfers are coming from. You know, the Harper government is that it seems like whenever there's an election, he comes up with these transfers and all this money for people and everything, but during the 4 years that he reigns, he just takes money out of our pockets. If he doesn't sit down and sign a health accord with the provinces, which the doctors have been screaming for, where are these transfers going? You know, like, why doesn't he come clean on this stuff? He refuses to sign a health accord, which is billions of dollars for transfers to health care to the provinces. Are we ever going to see it? Like, where do they base their 2% and 3% and 6% increases in transfer payments? Which transfer payments are they talking about?
Thank you, David. Our next question comes to us from Richard Patterson, who writes, what will be the cost for the additional family members admitted to Canada in terms of social and resettlement dollars? And we start with Mr. MacEachern.
Well, we've put out a fully costed platform with our budget, so it is available to people to see what those costs would entail. But I think Canada has always done a good job of that. Canada is a country that's been built on people immigrating to Canada, and we need to make sure that we remain, you know, that kind of country that is going to be welcoming immigrants with open arms. And I think, sadly, we've moved away from that, and we've decided to turn it into a financial decision or a security decision, when really we have an obligation, the global community has an obligation to support people when they're in need.
Thank you, Mr. MacEachern. JoAnne Fleming, would you like to respond to that?
I don't have numbers for that, but I do know that the culture of Canadians wanting to reach out and help others is very real. There are many, many people and organizations that are wanting to support these immigrants who want to find safety here in Canada, and it is a responsibility of all Canadians to be assisting as well. The sponsorship by organizations of these people is certainly helping to alleviate the costs of bringing these people in, so it's not just a taxpayer expense.
Thank you. David Matthews.
I don't have the exact figure of what we've budgeted for to bring these people in here, but I do know for a fact that in most cases, after 6 months, they become a valuable part of the communities. They work, they contribute to the economy. So when you take a look at the expense compared to the fact that within 6 months they will actually be adding to our economy, it outweighs each other. The major point is to get these people over here and stop the fear-mongering to do it.
Thank you, David. Dr. Leitch.
As I mentioned before, we have an approach to bringing Syrian refugees here. First and foremost, though, it's confronting ISIS on the ground militarily. Second is providing humanitarian support. To date, Canadians, as I said, can be proud of the fact that we've invested $750 million in humanitarian relief in the region. And the third is refugee resettlement. And I think we all have a lot to be proud of the Canadians, both here in Simcoe-Grey but across the country, who have stepped up to sponsor refugees, individuals who are coming to this country. As I mentioned before, over 2,000 have now come from Syria, are already here in Canada, over 22,000 from Iraq, and we'll continue to accept them with open arms, as I say, being sponsored privately by families and by communities, as well as supported by the Canadian government.
Thank you. Our next question is to all the candidates. We'll start with JoAnne Fleming. Would you restore protection formerly under the NWPA, the Navigable Waters Protection Act, to the 99% of lakes and rivers that in 2014 lost that protection?
I would restore it to all lakes and rivers that had that protection before. There's no question that our water is one of our most precious resources. It's a resource that is abundant in our country, and we need to do everything we can to protect it, and it is a very high priority.
Thank you. David Matthews.
Yes, I would restore it. I'd restore it to 100% of them. Like, water is a very valuable commodity to this country, and it's got to be protected. It is one of the resources within probably 20 to 30 years that will be more valuable than oil. The United States, something like 80% of their rivers and lakes are polluted. And the United States, one of the reasons that keeps them in NAFTA is because of the agreement to be able to take bulk water to the United States. You know, and this is something that we have to protect.
Kellie Leitch.
As I mentioned before, the Navigable Waters Protection Act is in place to protect navigation and commercial shipping. That is the intent of the act. There are 4 other acts that focus on making sure that our environment is safe and protected. And those are the ones that we actually have to make sure that we are diligent about maintaining. The Environmental Protections Act, the Environmental Assessments Act, the Species at Risk Act, as well as the Fisheries Act. So I want to be clear that we're not mixing issues with regards to commercial shipping with those of the environment. We absolutely have to protect our environment. There are 4 substantive pieces of legislation that do exactly that. The Navigable Waters Act is one that is about protecting navigation in commercial shipping.
Thank you, Kellie Leitch. Mike MacEachern.
Actually, I'm aware of a local, again, I had some real good on-the-ground knowledge when we talk about municipalities and the things that they face. And in fact, the Government of Canada was going to enforce the Navigable Waters Act and require an environmental assessment of a bridge that we were building over the Beaton Creek. So it is a piece of legislation that did afford a higher level of environmental protection for our waterways. And it has been taken away. The Liberal government is absolutely committed to restoring a robust environmental assessment process for a host of environmentally sensitive projects. And we will restore, we will unmuzzle scientists and people and take the facts and not be afraid of that information when making decisions.
Thank you, Mike. This question will start with David Matthews. What will you do for seniors?
The first thing that the NDP is going to do is increase Canada pension for seniors and the subsidy. We have too many seniors living in poverty. We also want to take all the daily bank charges away from the banks and make it so that if you use an ATM machine, the biggest charge would be 50 cents. The Harper government is actually putting seniors into poverty. You know, they've cut money from like the medical field. Seniors can't get housing. They've promised, you know, the surprising thing, both the Liberals and the Conservatives over the last 20 years have promised to build affordable housing, and none of them has produced any. You know, we continually hear that. Seniors need affordable housing. Seniors also need an income that will keep them in their homes because oh, sorry, I thought the mic went off. Seniors need income to keep them in their homes. 70% of seniors in Canada still hold mortgages on their houses, and a lot of them are in fear because the cost of living continues to rise and their income doesn't.
Thank you, David Matthews. Now the mic has gone off. Sorry. Dr. Leitch. Thank you, David Matthews. Dr. Leitch, what will you do for seniors?
Recently announced is a new single seniors tax credit, which goes hand in glove with a number of other initiatives the Government of Canada has already put in place. The tax-free savings account that was recently doubled to make sure that Canadian seniors, in fact, the majority of individuals that access this are seniors. Over 10 million Canadians have accessed it, and it is growing. Second, making sure that there's been an increase to GIS and the OAS. In fact, the single largest increases to these have been done under the Conservative government in the last 5 years. Pension income splitting. Probably first and foremost on my mind, I know many of you are couples and you're older. That pension income splitting is something that we put in place, and both the Liberals and the NDP have said they'll take it away. Making sure that there is more money in the pockets of Canadian seniors, making sure that there is more money in the pockets of Canadian seniors is extremely important. It provides them flexibility so that they can afford the things that they want to do. They're pay for their homes, pay for their hydro, which in this province, through the Liberal government, is escalated beyond
belief. Thank you, Dr. Leitch.
And make sure that they can pay for programming that they prefer.
Thank you, Dr. Leitch. Mike MacEachern.
Here, I think we just had a demonstration of the issue about working with people, working with provinces, as being honest about what's happening. The Liberal government has written and keeps to write down on paper so that everybody can see we are not cutting income splitting for seniors. We'd immediately move back the eligibility for old age security and the guaranteed income supplement back to 65 from 67, which the Conservatives put in place. That would put the average of $13,000 annually into the pockets of the lowest income Canadians as they become seniors. And I'll tell you what our government would do. Our government would work with the province on CPP to make improvements. But we would certainly not treat provinces the way this federal government treats them.
Thank you, Mike MacEachern. JoAnne Fleming.
Seniors are a large part of this riding, and I have been in a situation where my husband passed away after a very long illness earlier this year, so I've certainly seen the healthcare situation up very close. We need a healthcare system that people can depend upon in terms of, first of all, providing pharmaceuticals. Secondly, to be able to have dependable home care so that they can stay in their homes as long as possible, to have increased Canada Pension Plan, to have a guaranteed minimum income so that no senior has to live in poverty. The programs for seniors must also include a priority for me and for us, which is a model of healthy care rather than sick care.
Thank you, JoAnne Fleming. Our next question we'll direct to Kellie Leitch. It's for all our candidates, but we'll start with Kellie. A more challenging question, considering you only have 60 seconds to respond. I'm not sure that John Tyndale had that in mind when he asked the question. Could you list, then explain your top 3 platform priorities?
Sure. Lower taxes, increased training, increased trade. Lower taxes, more money back in your pocket so you can afford the things that you want, whether that's a hockey stick for your child or paying down your mortgage. Trade, making sure we have expanded markets for Canadians to sell to. We're a trading nation. We need to grow and create jobs. And training, making sure young Canadians in particular have all the skills they need for the jobs available for them today so they actually can succeed in the future. Those are the 3 things we're focused on.
Thank you. Mike MacEachern.
I had the good privilege of working with veterans in our community to build a cenotaph, and part of that was understanding the incredible sacrifice those gentlemen made and ladies made during the war, and they were to come back, and we decided to build a cenotaph in our community. That was very important. I would reestablish our commitment to veterans. I would not promise money and not spend it on veterans. I would work closely with them to reopen centers to support them. I would be very much in favor of the post-traumatic stress disorder centers that we're going to commit to that will help both veterans and first responders. I would cut the middle income tax, and I would be supportive, and I'd really push for the Canada Child Benefit that'll take 315,000 kids out of poverty.
Thank you. JoAnne Fleming.
The three top priorities for the Green Party are, first of all, to restore our democracy. Part of restoring our democracy would be implementing a proportional representation system so that we no longer have to deal with the fear that is driving the difficult choice of who to vote for in this election. The second priority would be restoring and sustaining our natural systems because we have no economy without the natural systems. We cannot grow food, we cannot create jobs, we do not have health without our natural systems. So that is our second priority. Our third priority is a green economic model in which all decisions are based on the social justice, social safety, health, economic health, and environmental integrity for all citizens.
David Matthews.
The NDP, I would say our three major priorities is, first of all, is to end poverty in this country. Poverty is a curse on the economy, and once again, I illustrate that it's the people of Canada that drive the economy. If they don't have any money, our economy goes down the toilet. Our second and most important thing would be the environment. We must bring Canada's environmental standards up to the world standards and stop avoiding going to meetings with the UN in Paris and all these things. We have to do our part to clean up the environment. And thirdly, and mostly, is a sound, equitable, even, fair economy for taxation. Everybody should have the right to work. Everybody should have the right to be able to eat nourishing food. The one thing that the Conservative government has taken away from Canada is equality, and we have to bring that back.
Thank you, David. Harry Richardson wrote this question for us. It's about national pharmacare system. The provincial health ministers have all agreed that a national pharmacare system is very workable. Would your party support such a system? We'll start with you, Mike MacEachern.
The Liberal Party and I am committed to a pharmacare system across Canada, and we're in writing saying that we would do that. We would work along with the provinces to implement that. Again, that same theme of working with the provinces to implement it.
Dr. Leitch?
The federal government has increased transfer payments year on year in order to allow the provinces which have jurisdiction over health care to make decisions that they think are appropriate for their populations. It's the responsibility of the province of Ontario to decide whether or not certain drugs should be on your formulary or not, or quite frankly, whether or not I get certain tools in my operating room. The transfer payments, as I mentioned before, are on an escalator. And in fact, in 2015-2016, the province of Ontario will receive $20.4 billion through these major transfers, an increase of $9.6 billion since 2005-06. It's their responsibility to decide how they will allocate that to make sure that the health care you deserve, you receive. Pharmacare is a portion of that. There you go.
Thank you, Dr. Leitch. David Matthews.
The NDP has had pharmacare in their policy book since 1956 when Tommy Douglas was our leader. It was hard enough to get a national Medicare program in this country without a government that is committed to health care. We will never get pharmacare. That is one of the things, if the NDP should get into power, pharmacare is one of the things that we are going to bring in. Nobody in this country should have to pay for prescriptions.
JoAnne Fleming.
The Green Party also supports a national pharmacare system, and we also want to ensure that alternative health care products are available so that it's not just a chemical pill system. We have a system whereby the pharmaceutical companies have a great deal of control, and they are making huge profits, and they say they want to turn them into research for more. But there seems to make sense to me that there'd be a much better balance between what their profits are and what their service is to you, the you, the patient.
Thank you, JoAnne. JoAnne Fleming, we'll start with you with this question. If elected, when Parliament is not in session, what will you be doing here in Simcoe-Grey to be working for your constituents?
I will be working for my constituents because I will be a full-time representative of Simcoe-Grey. The role of an MP is, first of all, to listen to what the needs are and to help constituents find their way through our institutions that can be very challenging. I believe that an MP is in a very steep learning curve to learn more about the issues that they are going to be voting on, the issues that are of critical importance to their constituency, and it is something that is a full-time job, more than full-time. It's a round-the-clock job, and I certainly recognize that it's a huge commitment.
Thank you, JoAnne. David Matthews.
I firmly believe that an MP's job is a full-time job. I believe that when you're not in Ottawa, you should be in your riding, knocking on doors, talking to people, finding out what their concerns are, what their problems are, taking them back to Ottawa and fighting for them. I also believe it is getting together with the various mayors in the communities to find out what the municipality problems are and taking them back to Ottawa. I think that this is something that you have to do. You people elect us to represent you, and I'm fortunate enough to be in a party where we do not have a party whip, so I can vote in the manner in which the people that represent me want me to vote.
Thank you. Dr. Leitch.
The thing I enjoyed the most is actually going door to door. And I think all of us have been doing that a lot lately, but I've been doing it for the last 4 years. I think it's extremely important, as was mentioned, that we do meet with mayors and municipalities. And Mike will tell you every year he gets an invitation to my home for a barbecue. And I regularly reach out to make sure that we're understanding what the primary issues are in this constituency. But I'm also a minister of the Crown. I have had the opportunity, by working hard both here in the riding and in Ottawa, to represent this riding at the cabinet table. That's extremely important to making sure that the issues and ideas that are represented here are at the highest level, whether that be with our sitting on Treasury Board or sitting on the Economic Committee of Cabinet, as well as being here. What I hear here ends up at that cabinet table, and I think that's extremely important for this constituency so that you're represented well at the highest level.
Thank you. Mike MacEachern.
I agree. The role of the MP is, from my perspective, is really to take the needs and wants of your community and communicate that to at the national level and make sure that the things that are implemented at a national level actually respond to the needs of your community. It's not the other way around. It's not to go to Ottawa and then learn about policies and then come sell them in your communities here to tell them why they're good for the individuals that make up your community. That's it. That's the difference. I think it's a full-time job, as I've indicated before, and I think my responsibility would be to be meeting with local representatives, whether they be community leaders or community organizations, leaders in the community, to understand the issues that are of most importance to our communities, and then, as I said, represent those needs in Ottawa.
Thank you. Our final question from the audience here at the Wasaga Beach Recplex comes from Alice Rod and Sylvia McGowan. It's about radioactive nuclear waste. What is your party's position on the federal government's plan to bury radioactive nuclear waste at Kincardine, Ontario on Lake Huron, less than 1 mile from the Great Lakes drinking water for 40 million people? We'll start with you, David Matthews.
Totally against it. 100% against it, actually. I've worked in that particular field. This stuff is very dangerous. When they built all these nuclear plants, they did not make proper provisions for the waste. And it's not just the core that comes out of those things. When they get dirty, heavy water, that has to be transported somewhere and stored. It's also the equipment that is inside those reactors that have to come out that are highly radioactive that have to be stored. They didn't make enough facilities. To bury that stuff within a mile of Lake Huron is totally asinine. Any government that would abide by something like that, you know, like they're way out in left field, they don't care about the residents, they don't care about our drinking water. This stuff is bad. They even want to ship it by water. What would happen if one of these boats ever went down in the Great Lakes? It would contaminate all the water. There's no clear way or no clear process of cleaning this stuff up once it gets into the ground.
Thank you, David Matthews. Kellie Leitch.
Well, as I mentioned before, the Government of Canada has robust programs for dealing with waste, and we'll continue to do that.
Thank you, Dr. Leitch. Mike MacEachern.
I think, as I mentioned before, I think it's similar to a question we had earlier, but the Liberal government's about making sure that we're consulting with scientists and getting facts before we're making decisions. You will be, you know, at times faced with issues that somebody in the past hadn't really previously thought about, but you don't have an opportunity at that point in time to say, oh well, I can't do anything about it. You have to do something about it. And the Liberal government, as I said, is about unmuzzling scientists, relying on facts to deal with issues that they're confronted with, and not being afraid to deal with you know, input of people that are experts in their field.
Thank you. JoAnne Fleming.
Prime Minister Harper fired the woman who was responsible for overseeing safety of our nuclear in this country. He overrode her requirement that the Chalk River plant install a second pump to improve safety and security. How can we possibly trust a system that we have a leader overriding a recommendation from the person who is leading safety for this country?
Thank you, JoAnne Fleming. That concludes our questions from the floor here at the Wasaga Beach Recplex. Give yourselves a round of applause for your attendance and great questions for today. We are now going to ask each of our candidates to deliver a brief closing message, a 2-minute comment. We'll start in the same order as we began earlier this evening, with JoAnne Fleming from the Green Party.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the Chamber for this opportunity to share our ideas with all of you. I would be a full-time MP. I would work as a team member of the Green Party and with all other parties to institute policies, procedures, laws, regulations to have the best Canada. I have a big vision for Canada, and I think you do too, and I want us to step into that vision now. I don't want us to be living in a world of fear, in a country of fear, or voting from a place of fear. I believe that our country needs to reinstate our federal research facilities in fisheries and agriculture and water and oceans and ensure that we are making science-based policy decisions in all areas. I believe that we should be reinstating the long census form. I believe that we should be upgrading CBC that represents our culture across this country. I believe that we should be reinstating Canada Post home delivery to the homes that have always received it. I believe that we should reverse C-51. I began earlier by saying change is inevitable, and I'd like to say that by voting for the Green Party, you are choosing positive change for Canada. Elizabeth May has proven herself as a remarkable leader in the debates that she has been able to participate in, and I think you can appreciate that she has a big vision for Canada and that she has a philosophy of working together for everyone's benefit for all generations.
Thank you, JoAnne Fleming. Dave Matthews from the New Democratic Party.
First of all, I'd like to say this has been a very good dialogue between everybody here on the stage, and the questions have been very good. I look at it as you as Canadians have a choice to make. After 150 years of the same type of government, if you really want change, you have to have change in the way the government actually works. We have to stop giving money to the big corporations who don't need it. We have to start closing the tax loopholes on the rich, make our tax system fair to everybody so everybody pays their fair share. We have to start taking better care of our veterans. We have to take better care of our seniors. We have to get people out of poverty. We have to start giving away our natural resources for free. They should be processed here, creating jobs for Canadians, not for people in China or Mexico or places like that. We have to stop signing agreements in the dark closet so nobody knows. We're Canadians, we're not stupid. We should be able to say, that agreement's good. Give us the details, not hide it. We have to stop living in fear. We have to elect a government that is for the people, that represents the needs of the people. This is what my goals are. If I'm elected, I will represent you. I'm not afraid to speak out. I'm not afraid to go against policy or anything else. I honestly believe in the people that I represent deserve something better than what they're getting.
Thank you, David Matthews. From the PC Party of Canada, Dr. Kellie Leitch.
Well, I'd like to thank the Chamber of Commerce of Wasaga Beach for hosting us, and again, also thank my fellow candidates for participating. This is an important election. There's a choice between proven economic and international leadership and the untested and unprepared policies of the opposition parties. Our message is clear. The Conservative government is a party of lower taxes, job creation, economic growth, and long-term prosperity for Canadians. The other parties represent increased deficits, higher taxes, increased spending, and job loss. These are the parties that support the same economic policies that have put Greece and China in economic turmoil. As Canadians, we can't afford to take this risk at this time. We need to stay the course with a stable economic plan, the plan put forward by Jim Flaherty and our Prime Minister, a plan that best manages and protects the fragile Canadian economy in the face of economic turmoil. So I hope you will once again provide me the opportunity and privilege to be your strong voice in Ottawa with a stable Conservative government. I love this riding. I love where I live, and it's a privilege to represent all of you in the House of Commons each and every day. On October the 19th, I hope that you will support myself and the Conservative Party, and that I can count on your vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Leitch. From the Liberal Party of Canada, Mike MacEachern.
I, too, like my fellow candidates, would like to express my appreciation. It's been a long night, and I appreciate your attention throughout. I think this election, as some of the members up here have said, represents a clear choice. You can do politics the way it's been done or being done now. You can promise one thing and then not deliver. You can promise things that are impossible to deliver. You can continue with the partisan and personal attacks. Or you can choose a representative and a government that wants to do things differently. Through positive discussion, relying on science and facts to make decisions, restoring our protection of the environment, unmuzzling science, and making government more accessible and transparent, I believe I have the on-the-ground experience, past experience. I work with people. I've worked with our municipality, understand the wants and needs of our community members. I understand how those can be implemented, and I look forward to the opportunity to represent you, and I would appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike MacEachern. That brings us to a close of our program tonight. On behalf of the Wasaga Beach Chamber of Commerce, we'd like to thank the candidates for their participation. We also thank the members of our local media for joining us in this program. Get out and vote October 19th from the beautiful Wasaga Beach Recplex. I'm JoAnne Eaton.